Welcome to Around Town. I'm your host, Dick Patten, and happy holidays, whether it's Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa. But we are coming to the end of December, and New Year's, January is right on the horizon, and winter is making it known that it's here. We're back to the old-fashioned days of an old-fashioned winter. But I am pleased to have on today Joshua Adjutant, who is he ran for a state rep position in a nearby town, but didn't make it. But he is here in the Concord area, and he's got some other ideas, and he also has a little bit something in common with my super director over there that they'll talk about at some point, because Joshua is involved with the media stuff. And so anyway, with that in mind, welcome to Around Town. And so you want more trouble,
Well, first of all, it's good to be here. And second of all, I think that, the New Hampshire Democratic Party in our caucus moving forward certainly got a very interesting mandate in this last election. The fact that Secretary Clinton, being the most qualified woman to ever run for president, regardless of my personal feelings on her, that is the fact. She was the most qualified woman to ever seek the office. Lost to the least prepared and least plausible candidate ever to seek the office, President-elect Trump, shows that we have a messaging issue, and I think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to look at over the next few years as how we bounce back from that. And what we can do to reaffirm to people that we are the party that has their best interest in mind, and we are the ones that are going to be looking out for them.
Yeah, but you also too, I know you yourself are hoping to maybe, thinking of a run for the Democrat Party chairmanship of New Hampshire, because Ray Buckley is looking to go for the national one. So you think that you are qualified for that, Josh? You think you can round the Democrats up and get them moving? Or what's your thoughts?
I do. I think that, I want to say first and foremost that I do respect Chairman Buckley, but I have disagreements with him as far as priorities for the job. I do not think that it is the job of the New Hampshire Party chair to elect the president. The Democratic National Committee has multiple operatives, has multiple campaigns in order to focus their attention on electing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or really anybody like that. But under Ray Buckley's supervision, we now have Governor-elect Sununu. We now have a Republican executive council. I didn't really think that we were going to win the State House back this time. My fingers were crossed, but that's pretty solidly in the red corner. And we lost the state Senate. So, with that kind of record, I think it's going to be very important for us to look at what went wrong, what did we do, and if it means, putting a new face on that establishment, then I think that that's one of the first steps, but there clearly need to be more decisions in the background to make sure that we are, as a caucus, able to reach out to the disenfranchised and forgotten voters that we had alienated.
Well, the Democrats did pick up about, how many was it, 20 some odd seats this year? So that's something. But yes, they were hoping to pick up a lot more and become the majority party again, but they did at least pick up. They didn't lose seats. They did gain, a certain number of them. So it'll be interesting how close the House will be this year, or if it's going to be. If I understand, there is another faction of the Republican Party again that is opposed to the current leadership, and they are having their caucuses off the grounds of and of course O'Brien is not with that group, I guess, but somebody has inherited that, and they are now having their own session. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if we go back to the days that, like last term, roll calls on everything from the Republicans. But Well, I mean, I think it's great that as a young man like you has an interest in it. I just hope that you can get your point across, and and have people. Of course, the big thing is going to be whether or not he can go push up to the national one. But if not, then I assume he'll try again for New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
When do they elect that?
Well, the Democratic National Committee's elections will be coming up very soon.
Yeah.
And the New Hampshire convention is typically in June and July. We haven't gotten a specific date yet, but we're working on that. The filing period for the New Hampshire Democratic Party chair is in January. So we are looking at that. We're looking forward to that date. I have announced that I will be pushing for that position and hoping to expand the conversation and see, what we can do to, again, return some of those Reagan Democrats that this time voted for Donald Trump and bring them back within our fold.
See, this is new to me. I've never heard of this. So in January, then you go to where? The Secretary of State's office to file for this, or
You go to the party headquarters.
the party headquarters? So that's where you would go there. to
Right,
file.
right. The Secretary of State isn't involved in
Okay,
this just
so
because
this
it's a
is
party
just
issue.
this is just that. Okay, I'd never heard of this before. Granted, I don't go to all their little tea and cookie functions, because when you go, they're always looking for a check, and I don't have the money for that. But that's good to know, though. I didn't realize that, and so you're all set to go and file.
Absolutely.
Now, what happens then? You start calling all the Democrat legislators to support you, or who votes for you?
The state committee would be the one that votes for us. But the way that we're looking at this right now is we're taking a two-pronged approach. We will have a more precise approach with the members of the state committee, sitting down, talking to them about the future of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, what we think went wrong, engaging them in conversation. And then we have a more broad approach, which is, bringing in the rank and file New Hampshire Democrats, whether they're people that consistently show up and express their frustrations, or whether they're people that specifically just have the D after their name because they didn't unregister when they vote, and that's just how they usually vote. So we want to bring those people into the caucus as well and appeal to them and let them know that, if we have a shakeup in leadership with the New Hampshire Democratic Party, then there's a better opportunity for their voices to be heard, and a decentralization of power, which invites more grassroots activism into the core of the party.
Well, that sounds good there. I mean, I'm anxious to see how far it goes and how well we can do. And I know, since I've got to know you, I'm very impressed with you, and everything that you talked about is good. And I know your heart is in the right area about this homeless shelter. I think, to me, that should have been a campaign issue of the city council back 2 years ago, or a year ago, back when they had the elections. But back then, not one person who was running for city council talked about a homeless shelter. It was all about Main Street or whatever else, but nothing was mentioned about finding or establishing a shelter.
Right, because right now it's midway through December.
Yeah.
And as everybody in New Hampshire knows, it's getting cold. So the fact that the city of Concord has kind of waited this long to just barely eke out a solution to their winter shelter is unfortunate.
It's sad.
I think that there should be a window between possibly at the latest end of November to beginning of April, beginning of March, to ensure that there is some definition there as to the existence of the winter shelter.
We've had some cold days, as you and I have talked off camera. There's been some cold days in November, so I think a shelter from November 1st to April 1st is adequate, or at least open for negotiation. But you're right, they just barely secured a place. They're going back to St. Peter's Church up on North State Street for this year, and that's it, because the Catholic Diocese is selling that property.
Mm-hmm. And this is the good thing about, I talked about that broader approach. Most people agree with us. Most people agree that there should be some kind of concrete strategy in place for combating, not necessarily alleviating the homelessness, because that's an entirely different issue, but dealing with it through the winter so that people aren't living in barren conditions. So there are a large majority of more Democratic and more liberal voters in the state that would agree with you. So that's why I personally want to take a broader approach to the chairmanship of the New Hampshire Democratic Party to encourage those people. Hey, well, why don't you run for state representative, or why don't you run for your council, or why don't you run for state senate? And get those people into positions where they're able to affect change, instead of feeling marginalized by central leadership that isn't necessarily listening to them. So I'm hoping that over the next few months, I will not necessarily lose my policy ideas, but move more in the direction of how can I ensure that we have the best people pursuing those policy ideas, and what do I need to do as a candidate for the chairmanship to show that, and to encourage them and make sure that they have everything they need.
Good. Yeah, great. Now, on the other hand, this is where Ian comes in, but you are also hoping to establish a media type group, if I remember right.
Correct.
And of course, my director over there, because he's a super director, I think, I know he has taken this show to all kinds of places that I never imagined, on YouTube and everything else, and I'm sure the two of you would have a good time talking about what you want to establish what now? I know you want to do a media type thing, but is it to promote programs, produce programs, or just how do you want to do that?
Well, what we were looking at doing before I had announced for the New Hampshire Democratic Party chairmanship was establishing a sort of online show and talking about the perspective of being sort of a red state Democrat, and explaining to people how it was possible that Secretary Clinton only won New Hampshire by 2,000 votes. Probably one of the slimmer margins that we've seen in presidential electoral history here, and kind of trying to reappeal back to those people that felt alienated. So I'm not necessarily putting that on hold right now, but I want to make sure that none of my personal biases implicate me in what I'd like to do for the party. I just want to, at this moment in time, show that we're as professional as we can be. When the time comes, we would surround ourselves with the most qualified and most dignified staff, and that we're looking to advance not necessarily the goals of the party's donors, but the people that rely on Democrats to exist. We talk about, the chairmanship and the officials aren't there for the voters, they're there for the party. But there are people that rely on Democrats being successful. There are people that rely on Medicaid. Now that the State House and the governorship are both in the hands of the Republicans, we're going to see probably 40,000 people that don't get health insurance and don't get health care because we're not going to have an expansion of Medicaid. So, it's unfortunate that we take another L in our corner, but that's on us. And there are people that are now going to be disenfranchised because we weren't doing our job.
Well, it's not funny, but of course it could happen, probably won't. With Electoral College, everybody's wondering if some of those people that are committed to supposedly supporting the president-elect decide that they to switch their votes and put Secretary Clinton in. It's going to be interesting when they vote soon how they cast their ballots because they are not committed to him, and they could upset the apple cart.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
and people, I think now it's important that we distinguish between November 7th Donald Trump and December 7th Donald Trump. Because if the Electoral College were to have this kind of miraculous flip where either somebody like John Kasich is elected or somebody like Hillary Clinton is elected, then we as a caucus still have a responsibility to deal with the fact that even if Donald Trump didn't win New Hampshire, it was very, very close. And all these Rust Belt states that fell, all these historically blue wall states that fell. So we still have to deal with that regardless of what the Electoral College decides to do. And I think it would be very dangerous to take an arm of complacency there. I am quite concerned with some of Mr. Trump's cabinet appointees. I'm very concerned with Rex Tillerson at the State Department. General James Mattis at Secretary of Defense is the only cabinet position that I can see having a positive. I'm very glad that in foreign policy, Mr. Trump will have a reasonable check with a level head on his shoulder. I have a tremendous amount of respect for General Mattis. Before I enlisted in the Marine Corps and till this day, I've always had a tremendous amount of admiration for the warrior monk, as he likes to be called. And so I think that is one of his few good picks. But the people I think that voted for Donald Trump are now seeing what the administration's actually going to look like. And I'm not sure what the Electoral College is going to
mess. I mean, it's my personal opinion, and this show this is not speaking for Concord or whatever, but these are our views. But I have to agree, I'm not happy with what happened in November, and it does scare me when I see things and hear things on the news, about what he's doing or they're doing or whatever. I just see our country really suffering bad. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be out to, do something or whatever, but it's just that, we have a lot of people this country has taken in and supposedly legally. Now what happens? It's going to be in that wall with Mexico. That's an awful thing because that sounds like the Berlin Wall. That Reagan challenged, what's his face, to tear it down. And it did come down.
Well, and I guess another important thing for us to look forward to as a caucus over the next 2 and 4 years, and certainly I hope for longer after, is to distinguish between the racists and the sexists and the bigots that happened to vote for Donald Trump and calling everybody that voted for him a racist, a sexist, and a bigot. I think that there were a lot of people that were hurting. There were a lot of people who felt like they had been ignored, and so they were looking for the candidate that was willing to just go in there, grab somebody by the neck, and get somebody's attention. And so they found that in Donald Trump. Most of the people that voted for him weren't voting for him because of bigotry and issues like that. They were voting for him because they had felt alienated by the political process, and particularly our caucus. So I think our message over the next 2 and 4 years needs to be, well, he has problems and this is why you shouldn't support him, instead of you now have problems because you're supporting him. And we are able to say that he has bigoted views and these are other reasons that you shouldn't support him, because we will have evidence of that, instead of what we have been doing, which is, oh, well, if you vote for him, you're automatically a bigot.
Well, I think I think the Democrats need to start recruiting some excellent candidates for president in 4 years. It's pretty sad, when you think all the ones that filed, and there wasn't many that did.
No.
The one from Maryland, the governor from Maryland there, because he didn't really attract much, O'Malley. And of course Hillary was in there, but and then I just think that we need to be doing much better because
right, and we also need to take a look at the fact that the average age of Democratic leadership in the House is 76.
Oh yeah, it's true, and we need some good young dynamic like the days of John Kennedy.
Hmm. I'm interested to see how Congressman Tim Ryan fares from Ohio. I hoped that he would beat Nancy Pelosi for the minority leadership in the House. I wish that he had pursued the DNC chairmanship, because he knows, and I agree with him, that the message of our caucus clearly needs to be responding to what just happened. Huffington Post, 2 days before the election, regardless of whether or not you consider Huffington Post a reliable media outlet, had Hillary Clinton at a 98.1% chance of winning the election. There was no reasonable commentator, aside from maybe Alex Jones, that was saying days before the election that Donald Trump had any kind of chance. He had no path to 270. I remember seeing it in the news.
Oh yeah.
Hillary Clinton already has 270
Oh yes, I
electoral
know.
votes
Yeah, she had all the
before voting had even happened, and now we see what happens when you try to
Yeah.
call elections before
Yeah.
voting actually happens. So we need to respond to that, and we need to understand that the same old clearly isn't going to work, and that's just how we're going to keep losing elections.
Yeah, it was true because
The fact that Hillary lost to the least qualified person ever to be president of the United States, with no government experience, no political experience, a swooth of internal business conflicts that he, in all possibility, might not be able to completely divest from, should send a message that there was something about us so awful that it was incomprehensible to vote for her and instead vote for him.
yeah, I know it was sad because I was shocked. I mean, we stayed up waiting for the results to come in. It was late, but I never dreamed that he would get it. But I hate to say money talks, but he had money, and there's no doubt about it. And I just don't know that whole family scares me because they act like I don't think they have much respect for the low income or middle class people. I don't care what anybody says, I don't think they have much respect for them. But
Right, and we've gotten blowback from certain members within the party that will remind me that, well, we are in fact the party of the common man, and we are in fact the party of the working class, and that's wonderful. I'm glad that that's something that we can repeat to ourselves. But perception is reality.
yeah,
Elections are entirely about perception. So if we're going to be successful in those races, then that's something that we have to deal with. Is the fact that a majority of Americans clearly now are looking at the Democratic Party as this kind of bought and paid for organization that's funded by donors. And it doesn't really matter that, Secretary Clinton won the popular vote by running up the vote in New York and Chicago and California. That's wonderful when you have a substantial amount of people within the same community and of the same mindset that all turned up.
Yep.
But we have to keep in mind that Donald Trump won in Florida, in Pennsylvania, and Ohio, not just in the particularly southern and midwestern states where Republicans have dominated for the last few years, but he had decent enough victories across the country in multiple socioeconomic spheres that we need to pay attention to that.
yeah, because she was predicted to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and they were very close. But who knows there, Joshua? So anyhow, but in the coming days, you're going to be busy and seeing what you can do to change things here and get the young people involved. I mean, that's good. So, well, we're coming to a close around town, and we've been talking with Joshua Adjutant about politics and his desires to be a candidate for the New Hampshire Democrat Party chairmanship, and we hope that we wish him well, and it's nice to see the young people getting involved. I have to say that. You know, sometimes the young people get shoved aside, but they are the future, or actually the present. So.
Right, and I know that that'll be an issue for us.
Yeah.
That my age will come into question. By the time of the election, I will be 22. But you know, if I feel that if my age didn't hinder me from enlisting in the Marine Corps, then it's hypocritical and a double standard to say that it necessarily hinders me from another professional role.
There you go.
So I think it should be a choice of vision and direction, and what we can do to make sure that we are successful at the end of the day.
Sure. Well, with that in mind, everybody have a great holiday, Happy New Year, and of course if we're on the Christmas season, and wishing Ian well as he goes on a little vacation to merry old England, and we'll be back with you during the new year. So I'm Dick Patten. Have a great evening.